Is there a possibility we could see a blockbuster deal between the Boston Bruins and the Philadelphia Flyers? We're going to discuss the parameters of a deal that's been circulating on social media. Plus, we have the latest update on Ethan Bear, what's going on with his injury, where may he land in free agency, and we have another complaint against a coach in the Canadian Junior Hockey League. We're going to discuss that and a whole lot more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a few things we want to take a look at here today. We have a trade. I want to take a proposed trade I want to take a look at here in a few minutes. But first up, we have some more concerning news. We have some reports here in the last couple of hours from TSN's investigative journalist Rick Westhead. There's another situation involving Canadian junior hockey that's being investigated. This time, though, it's not players. This time, it's a coach. And he's actually being investigated by the U.S. Center for Safe Sport. The head coach in question here is Dennis Williams, who is the head coach and general manager of the Everett Silvertips in the Western Hockey League. The reason it's under the jurisdiction of the U.S. Center for Safe Sport is because Everett is technically in the U.S. on the West Coast. So obviously these incidents that are being alleged took place there on U.S. soil, so they're the investigative party. Now, Dennis Williams, not only is he the head coach and manager for the Everett Silvertips, he was most recently the 2023 head coach for Team Canada's World Junior Championship hockey team, of course, which won the gold medal. So certainly we are awaiting on big news, which I anticipate could, and I don't know for sure, possibly could come this weekend on the 2018 World Junior investigation that's been ongoing for over a year. It's believed that the results are pretty much ready to roll and that we're going to get an announcement anytime is what a lot of the people in the know are saying. And as we wait for that and think it's really, really close to finding out what the league is going to be doing or, legally what some of these players may be facing, we have another situation on our hands. Now, this one it's a little bit different. I don't think it's quite as serious, but it's still a concerning event that supposedly took place. And actually, as we read through the information from Rick Westhead, it kind of shows us that this coach has actually had other complaints. So essentially, the complaint that I believe that they're investigating here seems to be something that's already been reviewed by the Western Hockey League. But essentially what has happened is that TSN and Rick Westhead, they have obtained a copy of the complaint, which was originally dated May 10th. It was apparently several players on the team had complained that the coach was using the player showers in the locker room, dressing room, and coming out around them in just a towel. I know in locker rooms, sometimes you see obviously players showering, going back and forth. I've been in locker rooms on sports before. I know some people don't really care too much who sees whatever, but I've never had a situation where the coaches were in there and actually showering along the same area as the players and parading around like that. So that's a little creepy in my opinion. But that's one of the things that was allegedly that took place. One of the other parts of the complaint says that during training camp back, I believe this was 2021 training camp, if I'm not mistaken, if I read the report correctly, that during training camp, he walked into a bathroom and there was a player in the bathroom that had just completed their VO2 max testing, and that is a very intensive testing that they do, and he was losing consciousness. And instead of helping him, who was only 17 years old, he took pictures of him and left him in there on his own and just walked out. So if that's true, that seems pretty irresponsible. I mean, if he was, losing consciousness and passing out from that extremely intense test that they put all their players through, you could be an adult and stick around and actually help the guy out. We'll see what actually comes from this. Now, there's actually a third piece. There's also a statement here that says there allegedly was a fighting ring that was during 2021 training camp, which I believe the other thing took place at the same time. So like a fighting ring, I don't know. I mean, some sort of fight club or something. Like, it just sounds like some pretty, inappropriate stuff was going on. Now, the other part of this that to me is extremely concerning is that there's now, we also found out in the same report that a former Everett Silvertip equipment manager and he's only formerly of the Silvertips very recently, had made a complaint back in January. And his complaint alleged forms of bullying, harassment, and other forms of misconduct against the coach. Apparently this was reviewed and nothing came from it. Mysteriously, this equipment manager, after the season, is fired. So, not to say that they didn't have other reasons to fire him. I don't know anything about obviously how he did his job or anything of that nature. But when you've been there a long time, suddenly you speak up because of some concerns, make a complaint about a coach, and then suddenly you're let go. It just doesn't smell good. I'm not saying anything's covered up or that he was let go because of his complaint, but he certainly seems to feel that way, and certainly seems to be like it certainly looks like it's a possibility. I hope for everybody's sake that these complaints are, things that didn't happen, but when you have several players reportedly involved in the first one and an equipment manager, it makes you wonder that obviously there must be something to it. At least it sounds that way. And like I said, even though this isn't directly linked to Canadian World Junior Championship hockey, he was the coach for that team most recently. That just took place, obviously in December and January of 2023. So you really hope that there was nothing else that hasn't been, reported or complained on here as of yet. I don't know. It's just a bad look considering everything we've seen Hockey Canada go through with the complaints and investigations and the things that we're still waiting on, as I mentioned, pretty heinous stuff. After the 2018 World Junior Championship team investigation was underway, there was other reports of teams before that that had other things that took place. I believe there was I can't remember the years right off, but I know there was other complaints of things that had happened, and we never really heard any more about investigations into those either. So it's just a really bad look. Like, can we not find people to work in the sport that are not going to do these types of things? Like, I don't know what kind of screening is taking place, what kind of training is being provided. I mean, a lot of these people, especially at this level of coaching, when you get to major junior hockey or international stuff, like, they have tons of experience and usually can provide tons of references, right? So you have to think that things are probably happening at lower levels. They're just not being reported on. I really don't know what to say about that. It's just we need to stop finding out about this stuff. And now we're not going to assume that at this point that Dennis Williams is absolutely guilty, because he has a right to be, innocent until proven guilty. It's a really bad look. And when there's multiple complaints, you have to think there's something to it. So we'll see what we find out from the U.S. Center of Safe Sport after they look into and investigate the alleged complaint. But again, really concerning situation again. And I really hope we can not have any more future situations like this to talk about. But unfortunately, we probably will. Update on the former Canuck Ethan Bear, who's now an unrestricted free agent. Of course, he was a restricted free agent and the season ended, and the Canucks failed to offer him a qualifying offer, making him a UFA. Of course, Ethan Bear, I think, was a good fit in Vancouver, to be honest. I mean, they got him for a pretty good price tag to get him out of Carolina, bring him to Vancouver, played well, seemed like to be a good fit, went to the World Championships, but then he got hurt, and he suffered a shoulder injury, and Vancouver media was talking to him, trying to get an update, and he told them that he's going to probably be out until about December, but apparently he said everything's going well, and in some ways he feels he's ahead of schedule. So if it wasn't for being ahead of schedule, he could have possibly been out to even longer, to January or more. So certainly, encouraging news that he's doing well, encouraging news that he's ahead of schedule. But he said in terms of a contract, there's really nothing close. He'd love to return to Vancouver, really thought it was a good fit and enjoyed his time there, but was told by Patrick Allvin that they just can't do it. They'd have to clear some cap space first. And we've talked at nauseum about the Canucks needing to clear cap space for a variety of reasons, and we have not really seen anything happen. We suspected that between the trade deadline and the offseason that we'd see at least a few decent-sized contracts cleared out, between, whether it be Connor Garland, Blockbuster, JT Miller, like some of these guys had to go, right? And Tyler Myers is still there, and we talked about him, yesterday that there's a possibility he could be dealt later in September once his signing bonus is paid, which is the way his contract structured is it's the later paid signing bonus than most are July 1, but his is actually in, I think it's like middle of September or something like that. So it's a little bit different, and it's obviously done that way intentionally to prevent an off-season trade. But at the same time, there will be ways to work around this for sure. But unfortunately, though, for the Canucks and Ethan Bear, they don't have room to do it. They haven't really moved any of those players out, and we'll see. But he's had interest from other teams. Apparently, there are some teams kind of keeping tabs, checking in, but it doesn't sound like there's anywhere near a contract offer coming. I'm going to say that as the season goes along, if teams have injuries and they could use a right-handed defenseman, then he's probably going to have his stock pick up a little bit, and he might have some more opportunities. But at this point, I'd be surprised if he does get signed ahead of time. I think it's going to be a late into the season signing, and we'll see once he can come back and hopefully play the second half of the year. Now, as I mentioned, could we see a blockbuster deal between Boston and Philadelphia? I've seen this trade proposal pop up on social media. I think I've seen it about like 3 days in a row or something like that. When I first seen it, I was like, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. And then I just kind of, moved along and what have you. But it keeps coming up, and more people keep talking about it online. So I was like, okay, I'm going to offer my 2 cents on this and kind of talk about why I think it could and could not happen, and how I think the deal would have to be a little bit different to make it happen. So ultimately, the rumored trade that's going around social media between these two teams has the Philadelphia Flyers sending goaltender Cal Petersen, who they just acquired from Los Angeles, who's making $5 million for 2 more years, and either Sean Couturier or Scott Lawton. But to me, Couturier makes a ton more sense. Of course, he signed for several more years at $7.75 million. Just missed an entire year last year. Would he make a lot of sense for the Bruins? He could be a perfect Patrice Bergeron replacement. I mean, he plays a similar style of game. He's had back problems lately, but throughout his career, and especially the last 4 or 5 years, he's one of the best two-way centermen in the game. Now, will he still be that when he returns after all the things he had to deal with missing the past season? I would hope so, but until we see him play, it's hard to say with absolute certainty. As I mentioned before, Elias Lindholm under Calgary would be a great option as well. I mean, ultimately, if the Bruins are going to be able to get Lindholm, he's going to command more money than this even. He's now Couturier's, I think, a little bit older too, but still, he's going to come cheaper. So, what's the better option, Couturier or Lindholm? I think a lot of people might like Lindholm a little bit better right now because Couturier's missed time because of the injuries. But there's pros and cons to each, I think. Now, going to the Flyers would be goaltender Jeremy Swayman and 22-year-old Russian prospect Georgy Merkulov. Now, Merkulov had a pretty solid American Hockey League season last year after signing as an undrafted player. The Bruins got themselves, I think, a pretty decent-looking prospect. And really, I could see why teams, if they're pulling off a trade with the Bruins and looking to send a veteran their way, why this might be a player they ask about. Of course, Jeremy Swayman was just signed to a 1-year deal through arbitration. Good young goaltender. But here's a couple of things reasons why I don't think this deal is going to happen, at least not structured as it is. For starters, you get Cal Petersen making $5 million and Couturier making $7.75 going to the Bruins. That's just shy of $13 million. But you've only got Swayman at like $3.5 coming out. So, you get like $9.5 million more money going to the Bruins, who have no space. Like, they don't even have space for one player at league minimum right now. So, that's just impossible from a salary cap perspective. Obviously, the Flyers, I can see why they'd be interested in Swayman. They've been rumored to maybe be trading Carter Hart. They definitely would not trade Hart, I don't think, until after the World Junior thing comes out, to make sure he wasn't a part of anything, because obviously he was on that team, and I don't think we'll see any players from that roster traded here in the next few days or however long we have to wait to finally get the confirmation of what players might be facing consequence, because there is speculation about 5 players facing lengthy suspensions, which we don't know, right? So obviously, I do understand the Flyers, maybe they like Swayman a little better than Hart, okay? Or maybe they want to try to run with Hart and Swayman both for a little while. That wouldn't be completely unreasonable. So having Cal Petersen there, yeah, okay, that doesn't make sense. But really, why would the Bruins take Petersen back? If they're trading Swayman or Ullmark, they're going to do it to get a real good top six forward back, a first-line player. Now, Couturier has the potential to be that guy. I don't see Petersen being anything that the Bruins are going to want. To be honest, if they were going to do that, it would make more sense for them to run with Ullmark and bring up one of their other young goalies from the minors. Or they'd go out and find a cheaper goaltender elsewhere. Doesn't make sense at all for them to take a $5 million Cal Petersen on. Even if Philly retained 50% and they get him at 2.5, I would not be confident that he's a quality NHL backup. I don't think that's an option or a great idea for Boston. So maybe Couturier for Swayman 1-for-1 wouldn't even work. Couturier could stay in the deal for Swayman and Merkulov, but again, money-wise, it doesn't work. The Bruins would have to shed another contract as well. They'd probably have to send another deal, whether it be maybe like a Grizzly or a forward or something like that, with the to the Flyers with Swayman. I mean, it would make things complicated, but yet interesting in a way. Like I said, I don't know what the Flyers would do. Would they then trade Hart? Would they run with Hart Swayman for a while? They would be, blessed with two young, great goaltenders. That's for sure. They could probably do it for a year and then make an evaluation moving forward, who they keep and who they trade. But again, do the Bruins want to make a substantial trade for a guy in Couturier who, yes, has all that skill, and yes, very well can be and has been in the past one of the best two-way centermen, but when he hasn't played for such a long time, are they going to make that deal without seeing him play for a while first? I really don't think so. So to me, I don't see this trade happening, but if it did, I think Petersen would not be in the deal. I think it'd be a case where they'd have to send him to another team. I can understand why the Flyers wouldn't want him. They don't really need him at this point. They took him off LA's hands as a favor, but ultimately they'd have to move him somewhere to do something with him. But instead, the Bruins would have to send Swayman, Merkulov, and like I said, a contract, likely a defenseman, to the Flyers, whether it be forward or Grizzly or something like that, to make the money a lot closer. The Flyers would have to do something separate with Petersen, and maybe Sean Couturier could be the guy for Boston. If he can keep a healthy back and play like he's capable of, like I said, he could be one of the very few players in the NHL that could be a real legit Patrice Bergeron replacement. Not going to ever replace him totally, but he would certainly be one of the next closest things around the league to having a shot at doing so. So let me know your thoughts. Does this Boston Flyers trade make sense? How would you change it? Let me know how you'd structure it in the comments. We can discuss further. And of course, let me know your thoughts on the other news we discussed here today as well. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.